Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Hope you're doing well on this fine evening. We're going to give it just a few more minutes for a few more people to join, and then we'll get started. Let's first of all disable this waiting room. Hope you're all doing well. You can raise your hand if you have any questions. There's this raise hand thing. I think it's under reactions. If you click reactions, you can click raise hand and it'll look like this. And if you have any questions, of course, we can answer them for you. That's what this webinar is for. I want to make this as interactive as possible. So there's two things I would like you guys to know. First of all of these notes are available online for free as well. And second of all, I'm going to post this in the chat for a moment. There we go. You can practice along if you would like to. We have labs available for you guys, as always. I love building labs. They show you how vulnerabilities come to be, because you cannot really build a lab if you don't really understand the vulnerability, of course. By the way, can you guys hear that music in the background? If you can, feel free to let me know. I have some music on just to make it a little bit easier on myself. I think most of the people who are going to join are here, and everybody else can watch the recording, of course, because this is being recorded. Just so you guys know, everything in here is being recorded. Don't be shy, though. If you have a question, there are no stupid questions, in my opinion. The only stupid questions are the ones that you don't dare ask. Now, let's start by talking a little bit about the tools when we talk about API hacking, because I mainly use Postman. That is one of the top ones which I am going to use. And Postman, of course, is a tool which you can run in GUI mode, but you can also run Postman in CLI mode and command line interface mode. If you would ever like to integrate that with your CI/CD pipelines, it's definitely a possibility. Just so you know, the term you're looking for is Newman, not Postman. Now, I'm working currently in a scratch pad, is what it's called. A scratch pad is where I'm literally just throwing things down. I can also switch to a specific workspace, but to do that, I would need an account. Now, I'm going to delete everything in here so I can start from scratch like I would if I would start a new project. And in here, first of all, we can see that we can add specific APIs, environments, mock servers, monitors, and histories. We care mostly about our collections. So in a collection, you can set up authentication if you'd like to. I have nothing in my collection right now, so I'm gonna make a GET request. By the way, could you stop drawing on the screen, please? Can I remove that? Yep, there we go. All right. So for the OWASP top 10, you can literally just go to this link here and you can open up a lab. Now, if you open up a lab, you can see a link with your labs already. Why is this? This is a Python thing. This Python thing crashes every 5 seconds. So if it's down, you can easily restart it with that link. Now you can see that I have two specific resources down here. One, to grab all of the books. Of course, I need to do this properly. I need to paste this behind my URL. There we go. So I can grab all of the books, but I want to do this in Postman. So first of all, I have my endpoint, the specific endpoint right here, but I also have a URL and a port that I need to connect to. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into Postman. I have a complete video about that as well. But as you can see, this will yield the same result. I can see certain items and I cannot see others, where if I add books ID equals 1, for example, there I can see a forbidden, whereas if I change that to a 0, I can see the actual book. Now, the first item of the OWASP top 10, if we quickly go back to the overview, is called broken object level authorization. Good luck analyzing that sentence. What does that mean? I cannot grab the items right now. I change this GET request to a POST request, et voila. So as you can see, I have HTTP verbs enabled, which I shouldn't have enabled. it's important to try this on every single endpoint. You should always try playing with the HTTP verbs here. You have get, but also post, boot, patch, delete, copy. There's a whole lot of things you can do right here. And if you're not sure what the endpoint allows, you can always do an options call. If you can see, we will return a allow header with post, head, options, and get. So we can try that post and we can see items where we're not supposed to. That is our first item. Oh, don't worry about it, my friend. It happens to me as well. Zoom is not the most user-friendly I found. When it comes to broken user authentication, that is when, for example, we have JWT issues. Now, JWT issues are not specific to APIs, but they are falling under this category. This also means that, for example, if you allow credential stuffing on your endpoint, then you have a problem. But also SQL injection, that's also a problem in here. So you guys all know that basic SQL injection test that a lot of people do. If I try this right here, I can see that I get a SQL error. In this particular lab, SQL injection is a possibility. Anything that has to do with your user authorization. So, sorry, authentication. First, we have authorization. Are you authorized to do this? Am I authorized to view this book? No, but if I mess around a little bit with specific things, then I might be able to see that book. We also have the authentication, everything falling back on the authentication endpoints, of course, logging in, that kind of stuff. Then we have excessive data exposure, and this is a very simple one. Now I'm going to simply plug this into my Postman right here, and I'm going to make this call. What is this specifically? It says method unallowed. That's because I still have my post here. Change that to get. It says no ID provided, so we will provide it with an identifier. ID equals, let's do 0. And we can see that we get CVV returned, credit card number fully returned, the validity date fully returned, and the front end might not be showing this, my friends, but because the front end is not showing this, doesn't mean that this stuff isn't there. And if the API returns it and a man-in-the-middle attack were to occur, you would have a very big vulnerability on your hands. That's already API number 3, API item number 3, excessive data exposure. Your APIs are exposing way more data than you should according to your front end. Rate limiting, my friends, my labs are fully vulnerable to rate limiting. This speaks for itself. You can perform much more requests than is intended to be performed. This is, of course, a very bad vulnerability, and you have to test this on every single endpoint as well, because it might be that some endpoints aren't properly protected by the rate limiter. Now, where does this matter most? For example, on login pages, because if you have proper rate limiting, then there is no password brute forcing. You're stopped by that rate limiting. But if you can bypass it or it doesn't exist at all, that's API item number 4. I see we have some questions as well. There's something about to it. Oh, thank you, my friend. I really appreciate that. We also have broken function level authorization. I'm blushing right now. So for this one, this is a very complex broken function level authorization. If the first ones were hard to explain, good luck trying to explain this one. And this one basically means that humans, we are very predictable. When we program, we have certain patterns that we follow. We always name variables around the same name. We always name endpoints around the same name. And in this case, we can see that we have an endpoint, which is a all books endpoint. Perfect. Now, if I go and request this in my Postman again, I can see that I get the same data, but I also noticed that they were talking about an admin endpoint. The admin endpoint, I'm going to try this everywhere. no, nothing. Then maybe here, admin endpoint, nothing. Then maybe here, admin endpoint, nothing. Okay, but remember, humans follow a predictable naming scheme. So I have to try version 1 of an API as well as version 3. As you can see, this is already becoming a little bit more suspicious. We have a bad request here. And that is because we have to try every single version of an endpoint. We have to try specific things, and we can try content brute forcing this, but as we can see, we already have a different error here. So this is something that we should be looking into. What's going wrong right here? Why can we not access this specific endpoint? Of course, look at all of these things, also parameter names. Sometimes parameter names are predictable, and that is what broken function level authorization is. So it might be a little bit weird to understand. Don't worry, it is weird. It's a weird vulnerability type. It's not you, it's the vulnerability type. Then we have mass assignment as well. Now the mass assignment labs, they're still under construction, but I'm going to show you those on rat side. And that's because mass assignment basically means that I might have a property like this specific user right here, lowprofdb, or I'll just name him test. We'll log in with this account. So this account has user settings. But if I go and look in those user settings, if it will load, of course. Oh, there was a pop-up. So we go to user settings, we get a nice pop-up already, and I don't know if it'll still work. It does, thank God. Then I can go and inspect what's going on, because this is also investigating my API calls. An API is basically just an application programming interface. That is a very, very broad understanding, as you might know. So if I submit this right here, I might also be talking to my API, which I'm going to be investigating. So let's make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see as well. First of all, I'm going to be looking at, I can't directly see it. That's because I think I'll have to submit again. Yep, there we go. So I have a submission to my user settings right here. And if I look at this payload, I can see property is administrator being 0 right here. This user has that property, and I send it along with my form. Now, the stupid thing is, right now I'm sending this along with my form because I know it exists. It's literally a field in here, but I'm over exaggerating the reality. It's usually not going to be a field in here, like you see right here, is admin is 0. This is usually not how it works, but the user might still have that property. And if we do send it along with the request, we might be able to change that property. That's how I found a lot of vulnerabilities, changing the account type, changing the administrator property. That is something which I use a lot. I always look at those user settings, and I always look at objects to see if they don't have properties which I should not be able to modify. So that's it for that vulnerability type. Mass assignment. I have to still change this link. Security misconfigurations that can go very broad, my friends, very, very broad. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, of course, and especially in the age of cloud configurations, where it's very easy to make one single mistake that can mess up your entire system. But my APIs, as you might know, are full of security misconfigurations. One big example is that my debug mode is enabled in these applications. That is a bad idea for production. Don't do that, because if somebody's able to grab my debugging key or brute force that, they might be able to start debugging the application, which is definitely not something you would like. When it comes to injections, we have several types of injections that we can do. And of course, again, there's several labs that I have for injections. There's the SQL injection that we saw before, but I also have a lab for XPOF injection, for example. And there's many different types of injections that we can try. All of them belong to this vulnerability category. So don't be fooled. Make sure that you look into all of the CWEs that belong to this, the SANS CWE list. SANS is an institution that that gives out common web exploits. So in the injection category, you will find different types of injections there. And it's interesting to know about all of them. For example, NoSQL is one that is coming up quite a lot recently. And NoSQL injection is something that is often looked at as well. Improper asset management. Of course, that's an API top 10 item, very vague as well. You should know which APIs you have. Otherwise, you can create what is called a shadow API. And that's an API that lives in production and nobody even knows that it lives in production. That can be a huge problem because you might not update that fully to meet the latest security requirements. It might be new functionality that lives somewhere in the production environment, but it's not been mapped fully yet. That stuff is very bad because it can mean an attack surface. It can mean something that an attacker can get a grip on. Then we have insufficient logging and monitoring. I always push my clients on this. Are you logging my attempts at attacking you? Are alarm bells going off? Is something happening in the backend? Because if that's not happening, of course, big problems. You want to be able to respond in a timely manner, have all the information you need. That means log all of the critical stuff like logins. If you spend money, for example, if you buy an item, if you ship an item, log all of that and have traceability from A to Z. That means if a user logs into your website and buys an item, you should be able to trace their full path and not just isolate a few of their functionalities. Of course, logging is useless without the proper alarm bells ringing when something does go wrong. So you have to make sure and ensure that your client has all of these things. In a nutshell, that's the API top 10. There's a lot more that I can cover about this. I'm quickly gonna dive more into Postman as well. You can also use Ready API for testing like this. Ready API can be quite an expensive tool. And of course, I can set the proxy of my Postman to Burp Suite and intercept my traffic that way. That's also a possibility. Now, let's say I don't want to keep on typing hexpert.com and I even want to try sandbox environments. I can literally select it, then I can copy this, and now we're going to make it into an environment variable. So this environment will be production, for example, and we will have a URL value with the hexpert.com link in there. So if we do that, we can save that, always save that, don't just close it. Then we can replace this with that URL variable. URL, of course, if I can type. Did I do that correctly? Environment. I did not set an environment yet. Production. So no, it's URL in all capitals, of course. And that's exactly the same thing. And if I want to do that to the port number, I can do the same. And then, of course, I can have that new environment that I was talking about as well. I can add this to the sandbox, for example, and I can give this URL variable a different value. And that makes it very easy for me to switch between environments. Might be useful if you're doing a pen test, for example. You can add a lot of different variables in there. We have authorization, which we can perform as well. Very useful. You can inherit that from your entire collection. So you can, for example, have a bearer token in here. You can enter that token, or you can say, I want OAuth2 authentication. And then every single request below that will inherit from that, or you can set it specifically per request as well. Specific headers, if you ever need to add those to the requests. Then the body, of course, if you need to add some body or change it. Recently, GraphQL added. Great, great, great. Love it. Free request scripts. What this often does is, for example, you might have a call to log in. That login fills the bearer token. That means that you're logged in, and then you can add that bearer token to your request. That's what the free request scripts and the tests are for. Test is named test, but it's not always used for testing. You can easily click some snippets here. If I need to set a variable, for example, I can set a environment, a variable. There we go. Give it a name, give it a value. Very easy code snippet, which you can include, for example, a test as well with a specific response time for your APIs. But that's usually not something that we're interested in when we're testing the OWASP API top 10, of course. That's it for my end on testing the OWASP API top 10. I wanted to give you guys some explanations as to what it entails and also give you guys some practical examples. Of course, this is all available as well for free on my blog, on my notes. You can click through on courses. You can go to OWASP course and you can go to OWASP API top 10, of course. And here you can look into every single item separately with a much bigger explanation than what I'm giving in 1 hour, of course. And it's not even 1 hour. I just booked an hour, but I think 30 minutes will suffice for this. It can go very deep, but it can also, as you can see, we can give you guys a brief nutshell explanation. I hope you guys learned from that. Do you guys have any questions? If you do, feel free to ask them in the chat or raise your hand. You can click that reactions thingy and then you can click raise hand. But if there are no more questions, I'm not going to take up too much more of your time. I just wanted to give you guys an introduction to this. And now you guys have some tools which you can use to look into this yourself. There's also a complete API Postman playlist that I have that explains all of these items in detail again. And this is so freaking cool. I love this so much because I can make monitors out of this. So if I have my tests set up, I can rerun them every single month. And if I have my tests set up correctly, I get notified if something reoccurs. Sometimes issues get reintroduced. What do I do when I find an issue? I'll program it in an API and I'll put it in a monitor to run every now and again. It's very easy for a developer who goes on a vacation to not know that something has been fixed. He checks in his code, overwrites that fix, and bam, your vulnerability gets introduced again. It's a few minutes work. It really helps me a lot. And I hope you guys enjoyed, my friends. Not going to take up too much more of your time. Thank you very much for being here, everybody. If you have any questions after this, you can reach me on info@thexssrat.com. Let me put that in there as well, thexssrat.com. And I propose we will soon do this for the OWASP top 10 as well, for the regular OWASP top 10. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you as well. Without you guys, I would be nothing. There is also an API testing course that I have available. But what I'll do for you guys is I'll try to render a video that goes much more in depth about these and put that on my YouTube channel as well. So look out for that in the coming days. Thank you very much, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, my friends.